The deep space research vessel Luminous Inquiry shuddered as it penetrated Earth's atmosphere. Senior researcher Vexora steadied himself against the navigation console, his 4 upper appendages adjusting the environmental controls of his protective suit. Earth's nitrogen-oxygen mix would be corrosive to Xyrillian respiratory systems, just one of countless lethal factors that had earned this unassuming blue planet its Class 13 Death World designation. Final descent protocols engaged, announced tech specialist Krell, her voice modulator betraying a nervous flutter. Atmospheric composition even more volatile than projected. Oxygen levels alone would trigger spontaneous combustion on 6 known inhabited worlds. Through the viewing portal, Vexora observed the lush green expanse of the Amazon rainforest swelling to meet them. Their research had indicated this region contained the highest concentration of lethal organisms per square meter on the planet, a perfect starting point for their unprecedented study. Stealth fields at maximum capacity, Security Officer Drex reported. Triple-checking the cloaking systems, the Galactic Council had been explicit. Under no circumstances were they to reveal themselves to humans. Observation only. The consequences of direct contact with a species that had evolved on a Class 13 planet remained too unpredictable. The vessel settled into a small clearing, its landing supports adjusting to compensate for Earth's crushing gravitational pull, nearly twice that of the Xyrillian homeworld. Warning indicators flashed across every console. Sensors are detecting over 300 distinct toxin signatures within scanning range. Biological specialist Mix announced, her ocular membranes widening in disbelief. 74% would be classified as planet-wide emergency contaminants in Galactic Congress territories. Dr. Loom, the team's medical officer, meticulously verified everyone's protective equipment. Remember, even momentary exposure to this environment could prove fatal. These suits are our only barrier between us and a world that evolutionary science suggests should be impossible for intelligent life to inhabit. As the team prepared to disembark, cultural anthropologist Zixtel reviewed their primary mission parameters. We've studied them from orbit for decades, but this is our first opportunity to observe humans in their natural habitat. We must understand how they've not only survived but built civilization on a planet that by all reasonable metrics should have killed their species eons ago. The airlock hissed open, and Earth's humid air swirled around their sealed suits. Gravity immediately pressed down on them despite their exosupports, making each movement require conscious effort. The team activated their data recorders and stepped onto Earth's soil. 50 meters from their landing site, they encountered their first humans, a research team of Earth scientists collecting plant samples. The Xyrillians watched in scientific horror as the humans handled vegetation with their bare skin. Vegetation that their sensors identified as containing compounds toxic enough to eliminate entire Xyrillian communities. One human researcher casually brushed away an insect, a creature with venom potent enough to trigger anaphylactic shock in most galactic species, with nothing more than mild annoyance. "Impossible," whispered Dr. Loom through the communication system. "Their biochemistry must be fundamentally different from anything we've encountered." Vexora watched as the humans continued their work, laughing and conversing while surrounded by more environmental threats than existed on the entire Xyrillian homeworld. They'd moved with an easy confidence that suggested they didn't even recognize the lethal nature of their surroundings. "Begin primary observation protocols," Vexora instructed his team, still struggling to adapt to Earth's gravity. "We have much to learn about these creatures who call this death trap home." Data log, Earth observation day 3, biological specialist Mix dictated, her voice unsteady as she adjusted her specimen analyzer. "The ongoing catalog of Earth's toxins has exceeded our database capacity. We have documented more naturally occurring poisons in this single region than exist in 17 standard habitable worlds combined." The Xyrillian research team had established an observation post at the edge of a small human settlement near the rainforest. Their stealth technology allowed them to monitor human activities without detection, though senior researcher Vexora insisted they maintain maximum distance protocols. Movement at the primary dwelling. Security Officer Drex announced, directing the team's attention to a human family emerging from their home. A small child, no more than 6 Earth years by their estimates, ran ahead toward the garden area. The juvenile is approaching the red flowering plants, Dr. Loom noted, consulting his toxin scanner. Those contain alkaloid compounds that would cause immediate respiratory failure in our species. The team watched in collective tension as the child brushed against the plant. Breaking several stems, a milky substance oozed onto the child's exposed skin. Commencing death observation protocols, Dr. Loom stated grimly, preparing to document what should be the beginning of a rapid and painful toxic reaction. Instead, the child merely wiped the substance on their clothing and continued playing. Impossible, whispered Zixtal, the cultural anthropologist. The toxin concentration should be fatal to any carbon-based life form. The team's confusion deepened as they observed the adult humans harvesting similar plants from their garden. Their sensor readings identified compounds that would trigger immediate quarantine procedures on any civilized world. They appear to be preparing these toxins for consumption, Vexor observed with growing scientific horror as the humans brought their harvest indoors. Using remote sensing technology, the Xerillians monitored the interior of the dwelling. The humans were cutting, crushing, and heating the poisonous plants, releasing volatile compounds into the air they breathed. This must be some form of ritualistic poison resistance training, theorized Security Officer Drex. Perhaps they conditioned their young to withstand increasing doses. The theory collapsed entirely when the family sat down together and began to consume the prepared toxins, exhibiting signs of pleasure rather than distress. They're not just tolerating these substances, Mex realized. They're enjoying them. These are delicacies to them. Later that day, the research team relocated to observe a larger human gathering place, what their cultural database identified as a market. Here, the scope of human toxin consumption became alarmingly clear. Humans of all ages congregated around displays of substances that the Xerillian sensors could barely categorize due to their lethal properties. These red fruits contain capsaicin, Mex reported, analyzing a display of chili peppers. It's a neurotoxin that triggers pain receptors and inflammatory responses. The team watched as humans sampled these peppers, some even comparing and rating the intensity of the pain response as though it were a desirable quality. The observation reached a crisis point when tech specialist Krell's protective suit developed a microscopic breach near a patch of what the humans called poison ivy. Despite the exposure being less than a square millimeter and lasting only seconds, Krell collapsed in anaphylactic distress, requiring emergency counteragents and temporary removal to the ship's medical bay. While treating his colleague, Dr. Loom accessed human medical records through their satellite uplink. What he discovered defied all biological understanding. They've categorized over 1 million potentially toxic substances on their own planet, he reported to the team. But more importantly, they've evolved detoxification systems unlike anything in our galactic database. Their primary organ for processing toxins, the liver, can neutralize compounds that would destroy our entire biological systems. Senior researcher Vexora updated the mission log as night fell. Earth hypothesis modification. These humans haven't merely adapted to survive alongside toxins. They have incorporated them into their bodies, their diets, and their culture. They don't fear poison. They have domesticated it. The luminous inquiry hovered at the edge of Earth's troposphere, its sensors struggling to process the atmospheric violence below. Hurricane Eliza, a Category 4 storm according to human classification, churned across the Atlantic Ocean toward the Florida coastline. Wind speeds that could strip the exoskeleton from a Xerillian body whipped the ocean into frenzied peaks. Atmospheric pressure differentials exceed safety parameters. Tech specialist Krell warned, fully recovered from her toxin exposure incident. No habitable world in our database experiences weather this severe without triggering planetary evacuation protocols. Cultural anthropologist Zixtel studied the human response patterns on the monitoring screens. According to historical data, these storms regularly destroy human settlements and claim lives. Yet observe, they're not abandoning the region. The team watched as coastal residents secured dwellings, stockpiled supplies, and implemented organized evacuation procedures for the most vulnerable populations. News broadcasts showed humans discussing the storm with concern but not panic, as though such catastrophic weather events were simply an expected seasonal inconvenience. Their structures are designed to withstand forces that would collapse our most reinforced habitats, noted Security Officer Drex with professional admiration, and their predictive modeling technology is surprisingly sophisticated. Most bewildering to the research team were the small vessels heading toward the hurricane's edge. Sensor confirmation required, Vexora demanded, certain their equipment must be malfunctioning. Are humans deliberately approaching the storm system? The data was unequivocal. A specialized group of humans, storm chasers, according to intercepted communications, were intentionally navigating into the peripheral danger zones to gather atmospheric readings and visual documentation. This behavior contradicts every survival instinct known in sentient species, Dr. Loom remarked. Yet their biosignatures don't indicate suicidal intent. They show elevated stress hormones consistent with excitement. The Xyrillians observed for 3 Earth days as the hurricane made landfall, caused significant damage, and gradually dissipated. Within hours of the storm's passage, humans emerged to begin repairs with remarkable resilience and coordination. To broaden their understanding of human weather adaptation, the team relocated their vessel to study temperature extremes. In Siberia, they documented humans living in regions where winter temperatures regularly reached -40 degrees Celsius, cold enough to freeze Xyrillian cellular structures instantly even with protective technology. Their dwellings maintained survivable internal temperatures, Mex reported, but the humans regularly exit these safe environments wearing only minimal insulative coverings. The team's confusion compounded when they relocated to monitor a Finnish community. There, humans practiced rituals that defied biological logic, intentionally raising their body temperatures in enclosed chambers called saunas to nearly 100 degrees Celsius before plunging into frozen lakes or rolling in snow. Their thermoregulatory adaptations are unprecedented, Dr. Loom stated as they observed a family alternating between extreme heat and cold with expressions of pleasure. Temperature shifts of this magnitude would cause organ failure in most species. These humans are inducing them voluntarily for relaxation. Their final weather observation took them to the Sahara Desert, where daytime temperatures soared above 50 degrees Celsius. Human settlements persisted even in these conditions, with residents developing cultural adaptations to preserve water and avoid the most extreme midday heat. Conclusion for Environmental Extremes Survey. Vexora recorded as they prepared to depart. Humans have evolved on a planet where atmospheric conditions regularly reach lethal parameters. Rather than developing technology to eliminate these threats, they physiologically adapted to withstand them and culturally adapted to predict, navigate, and even appreciate them. He paused, watching a group of children playing in the rain puddles left by a thunderstorm. Most concerning of all, they are teaching their young to find joy in conditions that would trigger extinction-level emergency protocols on any reasonable world. The Xyrillian research team established their observation post near a human medical facility, what the locals called a hospital. The building's exterior appeared unremarkable, but the team's interest lay in what occurred inside. After 7 Earth days studying the planet's crushing gravity, they needed to understand how humans survived its constant punishment. Infiltration of data systems complete, tech specialist Krell announced from the safety of their cloaked vessel. I've established access to their medical diagnostic imaging archives. The team gathered around the holographic display as Dr. Loom sorted through the human medical files. The first images appeared, skeletal scans of human patients with various fractures and trauma injuries. By the cosmic void, whispered Zixtel, cultural anthropologist, as the extent of the injuries became clear. These damage patterns would be fatal on our world. Dr. Loom's appendages trembled slightly as he manipulated the displays. Not only did these humans survive these injuries, but observe the follow-up scans. Complete cellular regeneration of bone tissue within weeks. Their healing rate under this gravity is biologically impossible by our understanding. Security Officer Drex studied the medical protocols with professional detachment. Their treatment methodologies are brutally primitive. They physically manipulate broken bone segments and secure them with metal implants while healing occurs. Without suspended animation? Asked Vexora, aghast. Fully conscious in most cases, confirmed Dr. Loom. They administer chemical pain suppressants, but the patients remain aware during periods of acute cellular reconstruction. The team's analysis was interrupted by an alert from their perimeter sensors. A short distance from their position, humans had gathered in an open area designated for juvenile recreation. A playground according to their cultural database. What they observed there challenged their understanding of human physiology even further. The juvenile humans are deliberately launching themselves from elevated positions, reported Mix, unable to conceal her horror as children swung from metal bars and leaped from platforms. The impact forces when they land would shatter Xerillian leg structures instantly. Security Officer Drex's attention fixed on a small human who had climbed to the top of a spiraling slide. That one is at least 3 body lengths above ground. The potential energy under this gravity would. The child pushed off, sliding down and then jumping from the end, landing with casual ease before running back to climb again. Their skeletal density must be remarkable, muttered Dr. Loom, but even more significant is their muscular response. They instinctively absorb and redistribute impact forces. Their bodies have evolved with constant awareness of gravitational punishment. Senior researcher Vexora expanded their observation to a nearby sports field, where adolescent humans deliberately collided with each other in organized competition. They're not simply surviving this gravity, he noted. They're utilizing it as a fundamental aspect of their physical development and recreation. When the team intercepted emergency communications about a vehicle collision, they seized the opportunity to observe human emergency medical response in real time. They watched scientific objectivity wavering as human medics extracted severely injured victims from crushed metal and administered treatment directly at the scene. Their emergency protocols account for their durability, Vexora observed. They assume survival is possible from injuries that would mean certain death for our species. Dr. Loom's final notes on Earth's gravity contained a disturbing hypothesis. The constant stress of Earth's gravitational pull has produced beings with unprecedented physical resilience. A human transported to our homeworld's lighter gravity would possess strength, speed, and endurance beyond anything in our evolutionary experience. Most concerning, their medical records indicate they consider bone fractures and tissue damage to be routine, temporary inconveniences rather than the life-altering catastrophes such injuries represent throughout the rest of the galaxy. Contamination alert. Filtration systems at maximum capacity. The warning blared through the Luminous Inquiry's communication channels as the research team huddled in the decontamination chamber. They had just returned from their first observation of a human population center, a moderately sized city by Earth standards. Dr. Loom examined the microscopic analysis results with growing alarm. Our external sensor arrays detected over 7 million distinct microbial organisms per cubic meter of urban air. The diversity alone exceeds the total microbial catalog of the Galactic database. Senior researcher Vexora studied the scrolling data with mounting scientific dread. Classification results. That's the most disturbing aspect. Dr. Loom responded, his voice modulator pitched higher with stress. Approximately 30% register as potentially pathogenic to carbon-based life. By Xerillian safety standards, this entire planet would qualify as a Level 9 biological hazard zone. The research team had positioned their cloaked observation drones throughout the human city, focusing on areas of high population density. The data they collected defied their understanding of how intelligent life could evolve alongside such microbial threats. Humans are not merely surviving in this environment. Observed biological specialist mix, reviewing footage of a crowded shopping complex. They're touching shared surfaces, exchanging respiratory droplets in conversation, and consuming food in communal areas without any apparent concern for microbial transfer. Security Officer Drex focused on a different aspect of the observation. Most concerning is that each human appears to be a mobile biohazard container. Our scans indicate the average human body hosts approximately 100 trillion microorganisms, a walking ecosystem of potential pathogens. The team's confusion deepened when their surveillance network detected unusual activity at a medical facility. Dozens of human juveniles were being brought to the building, where medical personnel administered injections. "We need closer observation," decided Vexora, authorizing a stealth drone to infiltrate the facility. What the drone recorded left the research team in stunned silence. "They're deliberately introducing pathogens into their young," whispered Dr. Loom, his appendages trembling as he analyzed the injection contents. Modified disease organisms, weakened but recognizable as lethal contagions. They call this process vaccination. Cultural anthropologist Zixtel studied the human medical records they had accessed. This challenges everything we understand about intelligent species development. Most civilizations achieve technological advancement by creating increasingly sterile environments to eliminate microbial threats. Humans appear to have taken the opposite approach. They've evolved alongside these pathogens, developing biological defense systems of unprecedented sophistication. The research team expanded their investigation to human food preparation facilities, expecting to find stringent anti-contamination protocols. Instead, they discovered humans intentionally introducing microbial cultures into food products. Cheese, yogurt, fermented beverages, preserved meats, all teeming with organisms that their sensors categorized as potentially harmful. Their digestive systems must contain extraordinary defensive mechanisms, noted Mix after analyzing human gut microbiome data. They're not just tolerating these microbes, they're dependent on them. Their bodies have formed symbiotic relationships with organisms that would devastate our populations. Most disturbing was their observation of human mating behaviors. The exchange of fluids and direct mucosal contact that humans engaged in casually would constitute a suicidal breach of quarantine protocols in Xerillian society. Final assessment for microbiological threat analysis. Dr. Loom recorded grimly. Humans have evolved in an environment so saturated with pathogens that their physiological defenses are unlike anything in our evolutionary experience. Their immune systems engage in constant microscopic warfare against organisms that would trigger planetary quarantine elsewhere in the galaxy. Most concerning of all, they appear entirely unaware of how biologically hostile their normal environment is by galactic standards. Vexora added a final notation. Hypothesis: should humans ever leave their world in significant numbers, their bodies alone might constitute an unintentional biological weapon against species lacking their microbial defenses. The luminous Inquirer descended silently over the Masai Mara National Reserve in Kenya, its cloaking technology rendering it invisible against the golden savanna sunset. Senior researcher Vexora had selected this location specifically to address the most perplexing evolutionary question about humans. How had soft-bodied, clawless primates survived, let alone developed civilization, on a planet dominated by apex predators? Preliminary scans complete, reported Security Officer Drex. Within 5 kilometers of our position, sensors detect 17 distinct large predatory species. Any one of them possesses sufficient strength and natural weaponry to terminate human life functions within seconds. Through high-resolution observation equipment, the team watched a pride of lions lounging in the afternoon heat less than a kilometer from a human settlement. According to evolutionary logic, biological specialist Mix noted, these predators should have selected against human development millennia ago. Instead, humans expanded their territory directly into predator-rich environments. Cultural anthropologist Zixtal analyzed footage of Maasai villagers moving about their daily routines, seemingly unconcerned by the proximity of creatures that could easily kill them. Most remarkable, observe how they've incorporated these lethal species into their cultural symbolism. Their adornments and rituals celebrate these predators rather than demonizing them. The team's surveillance drones captured footage of a human ceremony where young males performed ritualized jumping while wearing lion mane headdresses. They're not merely coexisting with predators, Zixtal observed. They're emulating them, incorporating predator attributes into their social hierarchies and self-identity. The research vessel relocated to observe another bewildering human phenomenon, what their cultural database identified as a wildlife conservation center. Here, humans were deliberately providing medical care to injured predators, nursing them back to health before releasing them back into the wild. This behavior defies all survival logic, Security Officer Drex stated flatly. They're expending resources to heal creatures evolutionary designed to hunt them. No rational species would rehabilitate its natural predators. Dr. Loom accessed historical human records, searching for explanation. According to their own documentation, humans were once prey animals. Instead of evolving greater speed or natural defenses, they developed intelligence, tool use, and social cooperation to counter predator threats. Their confusion deepened when observation drones captured footage of human wildlife photographers intentionally positioning themselves in close proximity to dangerous predators, armed with nothing more than optical recording devices and minimal safety protocols. They're seeking proximity to these creatures, Vexora noted, not for survival advantages, but for aesthetic appreciation. The most disturbing discovery came when the team observed human dwellings in regions with high concentrations of venomous snakes and spiders. Rather than exterminating these threats, as any rational species would, many humans relocated the dangerous creatures without harming them. Final assessment of human-predator relationships. Vexora recorded as the vessel prepared to depart the region. Humans did not evolve by eliminating predator threats as our species did. Instead, they developed complex adaptations allowing them to survive alongside lethal creatures. Most concerning is their apparent emotional attachment to predators that should, by evolutionary logic, trigger immediate fear responses. Security Officer Drex added his own grim conclusion. A species that views apex predators with admiration rather than terror possesses a fundamentally different psychological framework than our own. If humans ever achieve widespread interstellar travel, other species must understand this critical distinction. They do not recognize themselves as prey animals, despite evolving on a world that should have devoured them. This psychological blind spot makes their behavior inherently unpredictable by galactic standards. Observation log, Earth Day 42. Senior researcher Vexora recorded, his voice modulator struggling to maintain professional detachment. We have redirected our study to what may be the most inexplicable aspect of human behavior, their deliberate engagement with potentially lethal situations without survival necessity. The luminous inquiry hovered invisibly above a Norwegian fjord, where humans were gathering for what their intercepted communications described as a base-jumping festival. The Xerillian team watched in collective horror as humans equipped themselves with minimal safety gear before leaping from a cliff face over 800 meters high. They're throwing themselves into the gravity well, muttered Security Officer Drex, his appendages twitching with instinctive fear response. The terminal velocity wooled. They deploy simple fabric deceleration devices, interrupted tech specialist Krell, monitoring the jumpers through high-resolution sensors. Primitive technology with multiple potential failure points. Their survival depends on manually triggered mechanisms with no redundancy systems. Most disturbing to the observers was the emotional response displayed by the humans. Their bioscanners detected elevated endorphin and adrenaline levels consistent with extreme pleasure rather than appropriate fear. They're experiencing neurochemical rewards for these near-death experiences, Dr. Loom noted with scientific confusion. Their evolutionary programming appears fundamentally inverted from our own. The research team relocated multiple times to observe other forms of human recreation, In Hawaii, they documented humans deliberately riding massive ocean waves that contained enough kinetic energy to shatter their fragile skeletons. In Colorado, they watched humans strap boards to their feet and slide down ice-covered mountains at speeds that would trigger emergency protocols on Xyrillian transport vessels. In Australia, they observed humans intentionally entering waters known to contain lethal shark species. Cross-reference analysis with psychological records is revealing a pattern. Cultural anthropologist Zixtol reported after sifting through human medical databases. Humans require regular exposure to controlled risk to maintain optimal psychological functioning. They have clinical terms for the absence of risk-taking behavior, depression, and anxiety, which they treat as pathological conditions. The research vessel settled next above a human entertainment complex, a theme park according to their cultural database. Here, humans waited in long lines to be mechanically accelerated at forces that strained their cardiovascular systems, experiencing simulated danger in elaborate containment structures. They've industrialized fear responses, observed biological specialist mix. They've created an entire economic sector dedicated to triggering the same neurological pathways activated during predator encounters or environmental threats. Most incomprehensible to the team was their discovery of human horror entertainment, media specifically designed to trigger terror responses for recreational purposes. Final assessment of human risk behavior, Vexora dictated as they prepared to conclude this phase of observation. Having evolved on a world saturated with lethal threats, humans appear to have developed a unique psychological dependency on danger. Their neurochemical reward systems have adapted to require regular stimulation through controlled risk experiences. He paused, watching a group of skydivers laughing together after landing safely. Most significant of all, what our species experiences as appropriate survival warnings: fear, stress, physiological alert states. Humans have evolved to process as pleasurable under certain conditions. This fundamental divergence in psychological framework makes their behavior patterns inherently unpredictable by galactic standards. Dr. Loom added his own disturbing conclusion. A species that seeks out conditions other species flee, that derives pleasure from proximity to death, and that deliberately engineers ever more extreme physical challenges represents an evolutionary path previously undocumented in sentient life. The implications for potential spacefaring civilization contact are concerning. The luminous Inquiry hung in low Earth orbit, its mission clock indicating 53 Earth days of observation completed. Inside the vessel, the Xyrillian research team assembled for their final analysis session before departure. Holographic displays surrounded them, cycling through thousands of data points collected about the Death World and its improbable inhabitants. Final mission assessment phase initiated, announced senior researcher Vexora. Our primary objective was to understand how intelligent life evolved on a Class 13 planet. Our findings have exceeded all predictive models and raised questions of galactic significance. Security Officer Drex manipulated the display to show Earth's orbital defense network, a system far more sophisticated than the team had anticipated discovering. Most concerning is their military preparedness. Despite having limited space presence, humans have developed remarkably effective planetary defense capabilities. The display shifted to show an approaching asteroid the team had detected 3 days earlier, a space rock large enough to devastate a regional area. Before the Xyrillians could complete their impact analysis, Earth's defense systems had already tracked, targeted, and diverted the threat with a precision that suggested routine response rather than emergency protocols. They're fully aware of their vulnerability, observed tech specialist Krell. Their astronomical observation networks are constantly scanning for cosmic threats. They've evolved in an environment where extinction-level events are statistically probable within civilizational timeframes. Cultural anthropologist Zixtol brought up intercepted classified human space directives. Most revealing is their approach to potential extraterrestrial contact. Observe these containment protocols for their own spacecraft, returning from other celestial bodies. They're designed to prevent Earth organisms from contaminating other worlds. They know, whispered biological specialist Mix, appendages trembling slightly. They understand that they evolved in biological isolation, that their microbial ecosystems could devastate other worlds. They'd recognize themselves as a potential threat to extraterrestrial environments. Dr. Loom expanded the display to show human military contingency plans. They've developed defensive strategies against potential hostile extraterrestrial contact. Their fiction and cultural products consistently portray scenarios where they are technologically outmatched, yet ultimately prevail through adaptability and endurance. A species evolved to survive constant threats, muttered Security Officer Drex, would naturally anticipate threats from beyond their world. The scientific debate about humans' galactic implications was interrupted by an alert from their monitoring systems. The vessel's sensors had detected a subtle scanning pattern sweeping through Earth's orbital space. Humans were actively searching for anomalies in near-Earth orbit. "Impossible," Krell exclaimed, checking the stealth systems. "Our cloaking technology should be undetectable to their level of development." Another alert sounded. This one more urgent. A directed communication beam was attempting to establish contact with their vessel. The message repeated on a simple numerical pattern designed to bypass language barriers. "They've detected us," Vexora stated, voice steady despite the implications. Decision point: do we acknowledge contact or maintain stealth protocols? Before they could decide, a final data packet arrived from Earth. A simple visual message showing human figures with arms outstretched in what their cultural database identified as a greeting posture. The message contained basic mathematical sequences and an invitation for communication. Final mission conclusion. Vexora recorded as the team prepared for emergency departure. Humans are not merely creatures who evolved on a death world. They are death world adaptations themselves, shaped by evolutionary pressures beyond anything in our experience. Yet, despite evolving in an environment of constant threat, they have retained capacity for curiosity, cooperation, and peaceful outreach. As the luminous inquiry activated its faster-than-light drive, Security Officer Drex added one final observation to the ship's log. Most remarkable of all, and perhaps most dangerous, is that these Death World natives don't know they're exceptional. They consider their lethal planet normal and themselves fragile. The galaxy has never encountered such a beautiful and terrifying paradox before.